in the fragrant shadows of Lavender Manor, where purple blooms hide deadly secrets. A scream pierces the night, sir. Reginald Hargrove lies dead, a dagger in his chest, a lavender petal clinging to the hilt. Miss Jane Marple, the sharp-eyed spinster, from St. Mary Mead, arrives for a quiet weekend, only to unravel a web of family betrayal, poisoned whiskey, and a staged murder. Was it Clara, the grieving widow with a hidden agenda? Amelia, the lovesick daughter defying her father's will? Or the nervous solicitor, his ink-stained hands betraying more than paperwork? As clues twist and alibis crumble, a shocking truth emerges: someone orchestrated a perfect crime, but one small petal could unravel it all. Can Miss Marple see through the lavender's deceptive charm before the killer strikes again? Chapter 1. The invitation to Lavender Manor. Miss Jane Marple sat in her modest sitting room in the village of St. Mary Mead, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she worked on a pale blue shawl for her nephew Raymond's newest child. The late summer light filtered through laced curtains, casting delicate patterns on the polished oak floor. Her cottage, with its tidy rose garden and well-worn furniture, was a haven of order, a reflection of her own precise mind. She paused to adjust a stitch, her fingers deft despite the faint ache of age, when the postman's knock broke the quiet. The letter was unexpected, its creamy envelope embossed with a crest she vaguely recalled. It bore the postmark of Sussex and was addressed in a flowing, elegant hand. Miss Marple slit it open with a silver letter opener, a gift from her late brother-in-law, and unfolded the contents. The letter was from Lady Evelyn Hargrove, a name that stirred memories of girlish giggles at boarding school, where they had once shared confidences over Latin primers. The years had thinned their correspondence to Christmas cards, but now Lady Evelyn wrote with warmth and urgency, inviting Miss Marple to a weekend gathering at Lavender Manor. "The house is blooming with lavender this season," she penned, "and I long for your sharp eye on our little family puzzles. Do come, Jane. Your presence would bring such comfort." Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. Puzzles, she thought. Lady Evelyn's words carried the weight of something unspoken, a hint of trouble beneath the gracious invitation. She sipped her tea, considering. St. Mary Mead had been quiet of late, no village scandals to unravel, no whispered secrets over the vicarage tea table. A change of scene might be stimulating, and besides, she had always been fond of lavender. She penned a reply accepting the invitation, then began packing her sensible tweed skirts, a woolen cardigan, and a small magnifying glass disguised as a brooch, a precaution she never travelled without. The journey to Sussex was pleasant, the train rattling through green fields and past hedgerows heavy with blackberries. Lavender Manor lay nestled in the rolling hills, a Georgian pile of honey-coloured stone framed by sprawling gardens. As the taxi wound up the gravel drive, Miss Marple caught her first glimpse of the lavender fields, their purple waves shimmering under the afternoon sun. The air carried their sweet, calming scent, mingling with the sharper tang of cut grass. The manor itself was imposing yet inviting, its tall windows reflecting the sky, its chimneys puffing faint curls of smoke. A butler, grey-haired and impeccable, greeted her at the door, taking her modest suitcase with a bow. Lady Evelyn Hargrove met her in the hall, her silver hair swept into a chignon, her silk dress rustling as she extended both hands. "Jane, how marvellous you've come," she exclaimed, her voice warm but her eyes shadowed with something Miss Marple couldn't yet place: worry, perhaps, or fatigue. "You haven't changed a bit, though I dare say we're both a touch older than our school days. You're 2. Kind, Evelyn, Miss Marple replied, her eyes twinkling. But I'm afraid my knees disagree with you. They laughed, and Lady Evelyn led her through a marble-floored foyer adorned with portraits of stern-faced Hargroves, their eyes seeming to follow the pair. The Lavender Room, the Manor's pride, awaited them, a spacious parlour overlooking the gardens, its walls papered in a delicate violet pattern, its air heavy with the scent of fresh lavender bouquets arranged in crystal vases. The room was furnished with elegance, a mahogany sideboard, a velvet-hosted settee, and a grand piano draped with a silk shawl. French doors opened onto a terrace, where the lavender fields stretched toward the horizon. Lady Evelyn introduced the other guests, who were gathered for tea. First was her nephew, Sir Reginald Hargrove, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with a brusque manner and a face weathered by years of boardroom battles. His handshake was firm, almost challenging, and his dark eyes assessed Miss Marple as if she were a balance sheet. "Aunt Evelyn speaks highly of you," he said, his tone suggesting he reserved judgment. His wife, Clara Hargrove, was a contrast slender and poised, her auburn hair coiled in a fashionable style, her emerald dress accentuating her pale complexion. She offered a polite smile, but her fingers toyed nervously with a pearl necklace, and her eyes darted toward the door as if expecting an interruption. Their daughter, Amelia, was a vision of youth, barely 20, with golden curls and a dreamy expression. Yet her hands twisted in her lap, and she glanced furtively at the others, as if guarding a secret dot. Mr. Theodore Finch, the family solicitor, was a small, owlish man with round spectacles and a nervous habit of adjusting his tie. His briefcase, leather worn at the edges, never left his side, and he spoke in clipped, precise sentences, as if every word were a legal document. Finally, there was Dr. Victor Lang, a distant cousin of Lady Evelyn's, a retired physician with a lean frame and a shock of white hair. His voice was soft, almost hypnotic, as he spoke of his passion for herbal remedies, particularly lavender. "It's remarkable, Miss Marple," he said, gesturing to a bouquet. "Calms the nerves, aids sleep, even heals in the right hands." Miss Marple settled into an armchair, her knitting in her lap, and observed the group. The conversation was polite but strained, like a violin string stretched tight. Sir Reginald dominated, complaining about a recent business venture gone awry, his voice sharp with frustration. "The estate's funds are not a bottomless well," he snapped, glancing at Clara, who flushed and looked away. Amelia excused herself briefly, claiming a need for fresh air, but Miss Marple noted her quick glance at Dr. Lang before she slipped through the French doors. Lady Evelyn steered the talk to lighter topics: village fates, the weather, but Miss Marple sensed undercurrents. Mr. Finch's fingers tightened on his briefcase when Sir Reginald mentioned the family trust. Clara's smile grew brittle as Lady Evelyn praised Amelia's piano playing. Dr. Lang, meanwhile, seemed detached, his eyes drifting to the lavender fields, though once or twice he met Amelia's gaze with a curious intensity. Dinner was served in a dining room lit by a chandelier, its crystal prisms casting rainbows on the damask tablecloth. The meal was lavish: pheasant, creamed potatoes, and a syllabub flavored with lavender essence, but the atmosphere was heavy. Sir Reginald spoke of an inheritance dispute, his voice rising. "Some think they can bleed the estate dry," he said, his eyes on Clara, who stared at her plate. Lady Evelyn intervened, her tone soothing, but Miss Marple noted how Mr. Finch's fork trembled, and how Amelia's cheeks flushed when her father mentioned suitable matches for her. After dinner, the party retired to the Lavender Room for sherry. Dr. Lang offered Miss Marple a glass, extolling lavender's virtues again. "It's in the very air here," he said, almost reverently. "A balm for troubled souls." Miss Marple accepted the sherry but sipped sparingly, her eyes catching the way Clara's hand lingered on her glass, as if seeking courage. Mr. Finch excused himself to review documents, clutching his briefcase like a lifeline. Amelia played a soft nocturne on the piano, her fingers hesitant, and Miss Marple wondered what thoughts lay behind her distant expression. As the evening drew to a close, Lady Evelyn escorted Miss Marple to her room, a cosy chamber with a four-poster bed and a view of the moonlit lavender fields. "I'm so glad you're here, Jane," Lady Evelyn said, her voice low. "Things are unsettled. Reginald's temper, Clara's nerves, Amelia's secrecy, it's all rather much." "You've always had a knack for understatement, Evelyn," Miss Marple replied gently, "but I'll keep my eyes open." Alone, Miss Marple unpacked her few belongings, placing the magnifying glass brooch on the dressing table. She stood at the window, gazing at the purple sea below, its scent drifting through the open pane. The manor was beautiful, but beauty, she knew, often hid thorns. She recalled a St. Mary Mead widow who had poisoned her husband with foxglove. Her garden as lovely as this one. Human nature, Miss Marple thought, was the same everywhere, village or manor. It wore masks. She retired early, her knitting beside her, but sleep eluded her. The house creaked, as old houses do, and she heard footsteps in the corridor, soft, deliberate, pausing outside her door. She held her breath, but they moved on. Indigestion from the rich pheasant, perhaps, she told herself, though her instincts whispered otherwise. Then came the scream, a sharp, chilling cry from below, slicing through the night. Miss Marple rose, slipping into her dressing gown, her heart steady despite the hour. She reached the landing to find the others emerging, their faces pale in the dim light of the gas lamps. Lady Evelyn clutched her shawl. Clara leaned heavily on Amelia, and Dr. Lang's eyes were wide with alarm. Mr. Finch, still clutching his briefcase, stammered, "What was that?" They descended to the Lavender Room, where the French doors stood ajar, letting in a cool breeze. There, on the Persian rug, lay Sir Reginald Hargrove, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, a dagger from the Manor's collection buried in his chest. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the lavender cushions. A grotesque crimson. A shattered porcelain vase lay nearby, its fragments glinting like broken stars. Clara gasped and swayed, caught by Amelia, who stared at her father with a mix of horror and something else, relief. Dr. Lang knelt beside the body, his fingers probing for a pulse, though his expression confirmed the obvious. "He's gone," he said quietly. Mr. Finch backed away, muttering about the police, while Lady Evelyn stood frozen, her hand at her throat. "Who could have done this?" she whispered. Miss Marple stepped forward, her eyes scanning the scene. The dagger's hilt bore a faint lavender petal, clinging like a clue left by design. The room felt colder now, the scent of lavender cloying, almost oppressive. She met Lady Evelyn's gaze, her voice calm but firm. "We shall find out, Evelyn. We always do." Chapter 2. The Scream in the Night. The Lavender Room, so serene in the afternoon light, now held a grim tableau under the flicker of gas lamps. Sir Reginald Hargrove lay motionless on the Persian rug, the dagger's hilt protruding from his chest. Like an accusation, the blood pooling beneath him had soaked into the lavender-hued cushions, turning their delicate purple to a sinister shade. Shards of the shattered porcelain vase glinted in the lamplight, scattered like pieces of a broken puzzle. The French doors stood slightly ajar, admitting a cool night breeze that stirred the heavy scent of lavender, now tinged with the metallic tang of blood. Miss Jane Marple stood near the doorway, her slight figure wrapped in a sensible dressing gown, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. The other guests crowded the room, their faces a gallery of shock and suspicion. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, her silver hair dishevelled, clutched her shawl as if it could ward off the horror. Clara Hargrove, Sir Reginald's widow, swayed against her. Daughter, Amelia, whose wide eyes fixed on her father's body with an expression Miss Marple couldn't quite read. Grief, certainly, but laced with something else, perhaps fear or defiance. Dr. Victor Lang, kneeling beside the body, rose slowly, his face grave. No pulse, he confirmed, his voice low and steady. Mr. Theodore Finch. The solicitor hovered at the edge of the group, his briefcase clutched to his chest, his spectacles reflecting the lamplight as he muttered about fetching the authorities. Who could do such a thing? Lady Evelyn's voice trembled, breaking the silence. Her eyes darted to the open French doors, as if expecting the culprit to materialize from the shadowed garden. Miss Marple stepped closer to the body, her movements deliberate, her gaze taking in every detail. The angle of the dagger, the scattered vase fragments, the faint lavender petal clinging to the weapon's hilt. She noted the rug's slight ruckling, as if someone had stumbled in haste, and the faint smudge of dirt on the terrace threshold. "We mustn't touch anything," she said softly, her voice carrying the calm authority of one accustomed to such scenes. "The police will want everything as it is." Amelia's head snapped up, her golden curls catching the light. "Police," she echoed, her voice sharp. "But it must have been an intruder. Those doors were open." "Perhaps," Miss Marple replied, her tone neutral but her eyes lingering on the girl's flushed cheeks. She recalled a St. Mary Mead burglary years ago, where the open window had been a convenient fiction to mask a family dispute. Human nature, she thought, was rarely as simple as it appeared. Dr. Lang straightened, brushing his hands on his trousers. "I'll telephone for the police," he offered, moving toward the hall, but Lady Evelyn stopped him. "No, Victor, let's wait for Reginald's instructions." She caught herself, her hand flying to her mouth as the reality of her nephew's death sank in. Clara, who had been silent, let out a low sob and sank onto the settee, her emerald dressing gown pooling around her like spilled ink. "He was so alive at dinner," she whispered, her fingers twisting her pearl necklace until Miss Marple feared it might snap. Amelia knelt beside her, murmuring comfort, but her eyes flicked toward the French doors, as if drawn by an unseen thread. "Mr. Finch," cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "I'll make the call. It's only proper." He hurried out, his footsteps echoing down the marble corridor, leaving an uneasy silence in his wake. Miss Marple knelt carefully beside the body, her knees protesting, and peered at the dagger. It was an ornate piece, part of a display she'd noticed earlier on the sideboard, its blade etched with a floral pattern. The lavender petal on the hilt was fresh, its edges uncurled, suggesting it had been placed there recently, perhaps deliberately. She glanced at the French doors, noting the absence of forced entry. The latch was old but intact, the key still in the lock. An intruder, she mused, or someone who knew the house well. The distant wail of a police siren broke her thoughts, and soon the room filled with new faces. Inspector Craddock, a familiar figure from past cases, strode in. his expression a mix of determination and exasperation as he spotted Miss Marple. "Another coincidence, Miss Marple?" he asked, his tone dry but not unkind. He was a man in his 40s, with a square jaw and a nonsense air, though he'd learned to value the elderly spinster's insights. "Not precisely, Inspector," she replied, her eyes twinkling faintly. "I was invited for a weekend, but it seems the weekend had other plans." Craddock's lips twitched, but he turned to the scene, his officers already cordoning off the room. He examined the body, noting the dagger and the petal, then questioned the household. "When did you last see Sir Reginald alive?" he asked, his notebook open. Lady Evelyn spoke first, her voice steadier now. "At dinner, around 8. He was himself, perhaps a bit sharp about business matters, but nothing unusual. We retired to the Lavender Room for sherry, and he stayed behind when we went to bed, around 10. Clara nodded, her voice barely audible. "I had a headache and went to my room early. Reginald said he wanted to review some papers." Amelia's eyes dropped to her hands. I went for a walk in the gardens after dinner, but I was in my room by 11. I heard nothing until the scream." Dr. Lang adjusted his cuffs, his manner calm. "I was in the kitchen, brewing a lavender tisane. It helps me sleep. I saw no one after leaving the Lavender Room." Mr. Finch, returning from the telephone, fidgeted with his tie. "I was in the library, working on legal documents. Sir Reginald had asked for some revisions to the estate papers." Craddock's pencil paused, and the scream. "Who heard it first?" "I did," Miss Marple said quietly. "It came from this room, just past midnight. I was awake old. Bones don't always rest easily." The others nodded, confirming they'd been roused by the cry. Craddock's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room. The French doors were open. Any signs of an intruder? One of his constables, a young man with a notepad, reported finding faint footprints in the garden soil, leading toward the lavender fields but fading into the grass. "No clear tread," he said. "Could be anyone's boots." Miss Marple's mind turned to the petal on the dagger. A clue left by accident, or a deliberate misdirection. She thought of a St. Mary Mead gardener who'd once staged a theft to cover his own pilfering, leaving a trail of mud to mislead. "Inspector," she said, "might I suggest examining the dagger closely? That petal seems out of place." Craddock nodded, signaling for the evidence to be bagged. "Anything else, Miss Marple?" She hesitated, then pointed to the rug. "The ruckling there, near the body. Someone may have tripped or struggled, and the vase's fragments are scattered widely, as if knocked over in a hurry." Craddock's brow furrowed, but he made a note. "We'll have the pathologist look at the body. Time of death, cause though the dagger's fairly obvious." Miss Marple said nothing, her mind already weaving threads. The dagger was too theatrical, too perfect. Like a stage prop, she recalled a village murder where a knife had been a distraction from poisoner, subtler killer. But she held her tongue, knowing Craddock preferred facts to fancies. As the police worked, Miss Marple retreated to a corner, her knitting in hand, though her needles remained still. She watched Clara, whose tears had dried, leaving her face pale but composed. Amelia's gaze lingered on the French doors, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Dr. Lang stood apart, his expression unreadable, while Mr. Finch's eyes darted nervously, as if expecting accusation. Lady Evelyn, rallying, offered tea to the officers, her hospitality a shield against grief. Miss Marple's thoughts turned to dinner the tensions. The glances, the unspoken words. Sir Reginald's complaints about the estate, Clara's nervous fingers, Amelia's secrecy, Finch's briefcase, Lang's lavender obsession. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture was still blurred. She recalled a St. Mary Mead spinster who'd hidden her lover's letters in a flower pot, only to be betrayed by a stray petal. Details, she thought, were the key. As dawn crept through the French doors, painting the lavender fields gold, Craddock approached her. "You're thinking, Miss Marple. Care to share?" She smiled faintly. "Only that lavender is a curious plant, Inspector. Soothing, yet it can hide sharper scents. Like truth, it's not always what it seems." He grunted, half amused, and returned to his work. Miss Marple's eyes lingered on the petal in its evidence bag, glinting like a tiny amethyst. The scream in the night had opened the curtain, but the play, she knew, was far from over. Chapter 3. Alibis and Animosities. The pale light of dawn filtered through the tall windows of Lavender Manor, casting long shadows across the dining room where the household gathered for a somber breakfast. The grandeur of the previous evening's meal was absent. Instead, a modest spread of toast, marmalade, and tea sat on the polished table, the clink of china the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. Miss Jane Marple, seated near the window, sipped her tea and observed the faces around her, each etched with its own strain of grief, fear, or calculation. The Lavender Room, now cordoned off by Inspector Craddock's men, seemed to loom over the house like a spectre, its lavender scent lingering faintly in the air. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, her silver hair neatly pinned despite the sleepless night, presided over the table with a forced composure. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured tea, her eyes avoiding the empty chair where Sir Reginald had sat only hours before. Clara Hargrove, dressed in a somber black dress that seemed chosen for effect, stared at her plate, her fingers still clutching the pearl necklace that had betrayed her nerves the previous evening. Amelia, her golden curls subdued under a simple headband, pushed her toast around her plate, her gaze flickering toward the garden beyond the window. Dr. Victor Lang, his lean frame hunched over his cup, spoke little, his eyes fixed on some distant point. Mr. Theodore Finch, the solicitor, sat rigidly, his briefcase at his feet, his spectacles glinting as he glanced nervously at the others. Miss Marple, her knitting resting in her lap, noted the air was thick with unspoken accusations, each guest a thread in a tangled skein. She thought of a St. Mary Mead tea party where a widow's polite smile had hidden a motive for theft, and she wondered which smiles here masked darker truths. Inspector Craddock entered, his notebook in hand, his expression brisk but weary. He had spent the early hours overseeing the removal of Sir Reginald's body to the coroner and directing his constables to search the grounds. "Good morning," he said, though the greeting felt hollow. "I'll need to speak with each of you again to clarify your movements last night. Let's start with the time after dinner." Lady Evelyn set down her teapot with a soft clink. "As I said, Inspector, we adjourned to the Lavender Room for sherry. Reginald stayed behind when we retired, around 10. I went to my room to read. Old habit, I heard nothing until the scream." Craddock nodded, jotting a note. "And you, Mrs. Hargrove?" Clara's voice was faint, almost mechanical. "I had a headache after dinner. I took a powder and went to bed. I didn't see Reginald again until..." Her voice broke, and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. Amelia spoke quickly, as if to shield her mother. "I took a walk in the gardens after dinner. The lavender fields are so peaceful at dusk. I was back in my room by 11, reading. The scream woke me. Dr. Lang cleared his throat, his voice calm but precise. I was in the kitchen, preparing a lavender tisane. It's a ritual of mine, helps with insomnia. I saw no one after leaving the lavender room. Mr. Finch adjusted his spectacles, his fingers twitching. I was in the library, reviewing documents for Sir Reginald. He'd asked for changes to the family trust, and I was drafting them. I didn't leave until after 11, and I went straight to bed. Craddock's eyes narrowed. And none of you heard anything unusual before the scream? No voices, no footsteps. A chorus of shakes and murmurs answered him, but Miss Marple noted Amelia's quick glance at Dr. Lang, and the way Clara's hand tightened on her handkerchief. She thought of a St. Mary Mead girl who'd lied about her whereabouts to protect a sweetheart, and wondered if Amelia's garden walk held more than moonlight musings. The inspector turned to Miss Marple. "And you, ma'am, you were awake when the scream came?" "I was," she replied, her voice gentle but clear. "Old age makes sleep elusive. I heard footsteps in the corridor earlier, soft, as if someone were taking care not to be heard. But the scream came later, sharp and sudden, from the lavender room." Craddock made a note, then addressed the group. "The coroner's initial report suggests Sir Reginald died between 10 and midnight. The dagger wound was severe, but we're awaiting confirmation on whether it was the sole cause. The lavender petal on the hilt is curious. Any thoughts on that?" Dr. Lang's eyes flickered. "Lavender is everywhere here, Inspector. A petal could easily have fallen from a bouquet or been carried in on someone's clothing. Perhaps," Craddock said, unconvinced, "but it was fresh, not wilted, almost as if placed deliberately." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, though she hadn't begun knitting. She recalled a village scandal where a single rose petal had betrayed a thief who'd brushed against a garden bush. "Inspector," she said, "have you considered the vase? Its fragments were scattered widely, as if knocked over in a To suggest one, Craddock nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We've collected the pieces. No fingerprints yet, but the dagger was wiped clean, save for that petal. The French doors were unlocked, but the footprints outside don't lead far. We're checking for matches to the household shoes." The conversation paused as a constable entered, whispering to Craddock. He excused himself to examine a new find, a letter, discovered in Sir Reginald's desk in the study adjoining the lavender room. He returned, holding an evidence bag containing a single sheet of paper. This was hidden in a locked drawer. He said, "It's a threat, unsigned, demanding repayment of a gambling debt. Pay or face consequences, it says. Any of you know about this?" Clara's face paled, her fingers twisting the pearls until one snapped free, rolling across the table. "Reginald never mentioned gambling," she said, her voice barely audible. "He was careful with money." Lady Evelyn frowned. "My nephew was no gambler, Inspector. He was far too prudent. This must be a mistake." Amelia's eyes widened, but she said nothing, her hands clenching in her lap. Dr. Lang remained silent, his expression unreadable, while Mr. Finch coughed nervously. "Sir Reginald did mention some financial pressures," he said, "but nothing specific about debts." Miss Marple watched them all, her mind turning over the letter. Blackmail, she thought, was a motive as old as time, but the letter felt too convenient, like a prop in a village play. She recalled a St. Mary Mead merchant who'd fabricated a threatening note to deflect suspicion from his own misdeeds. Was this letter genuine or a distraction? Craddock pocketed the evidence bag. We'll trace the handwriting and paper. For now, I need your shoes for comparison to the garden prints. And Mrs. Hargrove, I'd like to see your headache powder. Clara stiffened, but nodded. It's in my room, just a common remedy. As the household dispersed to comply, Miss Marple lingered, her eyes on the lavender fields, visible through the window. The sun had risen fully now, bathing the purple blooms in golden light, but their beauty felt deceptive, like a charming smile hiding malice. She approached Lady Evelyn, who was gathering the tea things with mechanical precision. Evelyn, Miss Marple said softly, you mentioned family puzzles in your letter. Was there something specific troubling you? Lady Evelyn hesitated, her hands pausing on a saucer. Oh, Jane, it's all so muddled now. Reginald was difficult lately. He argued with Clara over money, with Amelia over her future. Even Theodore seemed on edge, and Victor, well, he's always been odd with his herbs. I thought your clear head might help, but I never imagined this. Miss Marple patted her hand. Trouble has a way of revealing itself, Evelyn. We need only watch and listen. She excused herself and wandered toward the Lavender Room, now guarded by a constable. Peering through the doorway, she studied the scene again, the ruckled rug, the scattered vase shards, the faint smudge of dirt on the terrace. The lavender petal haunted her thoughts, not an accident, she was certain, but a clue to someone's intent. She recalled a St. Mary Mead vicar who'd left a hymn book open to a specific page. A subtle signal to his accomplice. Was the petal such a signal, or a misstep by the killer? Returning to the dining room, she found Amelia alone, staring out at the gardens. The girl's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but her jaw was set with a determination Miss Marple recognized from village girls, in love or in trouble. Amelia, she said gently, your walk in the gardens last night, did you see anyone? Amelia started, her hands twisting her handkerchief. No, Miss Marple, just the lavender and the stars. It was peaceful. Miss Marple nodded, her smile kind but probing. Peace is a rare gift, my dear. But secrets, they weigh heavy, don't they? Amelia's eyes flickered, but she said nothing, hurrying away as Dr. Lang approached. Miss Marple watched her go, her mind weaving threads. Clara's nerves, Amelia's evasions, Finch's fidgeting, Lang's calm detachment. The letter, the petal, the unlocked dorsage was a piece, but the pattern remained elusive as she resumed her seat. Her knitting untouched, Miss Marple felt the familiar stir of intuition. The truth, she knew, lay not in the grand gestures, but in the small things, the glance, the pause, the petal. And in Lavender Manor, the small things were beginning to whisper. Chapter 4. The herbalist's secret. The morning sun climbed higher, bathing Lavender Manor's gardens in a warm glow, but the air inside remained heavy with suspicion. Miss Jane Marple sat in a quiet corner of the drawing room, her knitting untouched, her eyes drifting over the household as they moved through the rituals of grief and unease. The Lavender Room, now sealed by Inspector Craddock's orders, cast a long shadow over the house, its delicate scent lingering like a ghost. Breakfast had dispersed the guests, each retreating to their own corners, but the questions raised by Sir Reginald's death hung unanswered. Knitting themselves into a web Miss Marple was determined to unravel. Inspector Craddock had set up a makeshift office in the study, where he and his constables pored over evidence, the dagger, the threatening letter, the lavender petal, and the faint footprints that led nowhere. Miss Marple, though not invited, had a way of being present without intruding. Her small figure, blending into the background like a familiar piece of furniture. She listened as Craddock questioned the household again, his tone sharper now, probing for cracks in their alibis. Lady Evelyn, ever the hostess despite her pallor, served tea to the inspector, her hands steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of dread. Reginald was not an easy man, she admitted, when pressed about family tensions. He could be overbearing, especially about the estate. But murder, it's unthinkable. Clara Hargrove, still in her mourning black, sat rigidly, her fingers no longer toying with her pearls, but clenched in her lap. "He was my husband," she said, her voice low. "We had our disagreements, but I loved him. I was in bed, as I told you. The headache powder is on my nightstand. Check it if you must." Amelia, hovering near her mother, spoke less convincingly. "I told you, I was in the gardens, then my room. I didn't hear anything until the scream." Her eyes darted to Dr. Victor Lang, who stood by the window, his lean frame silhouetted against the lavender fields. Miss Marple noted the glance, brief but telling. Like a village girl's look to a forbidden suitor, Dr. Lang himself was composed, his white hair neatly combed, his voice soft as he reiterated his story. "I was in the kitchen, brewing my tisane. Lavender, chamomile, simple remedy. I saw no one, heard nothing until the scream." But his fingers brushed the cuff of his jacket, a small gesture Miss Marple recognized as a sign of unease. Like a St. Mary Mead shopkeeper caught fudging his accounts, Mr. Theodore Finch, clutching his briefcase as if it were a talisman, stammered. Through his account, the library inspector I was working on Sir Reginald's papers. He wanted changes to the trust, nothing unusual, just estate matters. His spectacles slipped down his nose, and he pushed them up with a trembling hand. "Miss." Marple's mind turned to the lavender petal on the dagger, its freshness nagging at her. It was too perfect, too deliberate, like a clue left in a village mystery play to mislead the audience. She recalled a St. Mary Mead herbalist who'd used foxglove to poison a rival, masking it with the scent of roses. Could lavender hide such a secret here? She resolved to learn more about Dr. Lang's herbal experiments. Excusing herself, she sought out the doctor, finding him in a small room off the kitchen, a makeshift laboratory cluttered with vials, mortar, and bundles of dried herbs. The air was thick with the scent of lavender, mingled with sharper notes of chamomile and something earthier. Dr. Lang looked up from a notebook, his expression guarded but polite. "Miss Marple, to what do I owe the visit? I've always been curious about herbs," she said, her tone light, her eyes scanning the shelves. "Lavender, you said, is quite versatile. Soothing, healing. What else can it do?" He smiled, relaxing slightly. "Oh, a great deal. It calms nerves, aids sleep, even eases pain in small doses. But it must be used carefully. Too much can cause dizziness, confusion." He gestured to a row of vials, their amber liquid glinting. "I've been experimenting with extracts, trying to perfect a sedative for insomnia." Miss Marple nodded, peering at a vial labeled Lavandula angustifolia. "And these are safe, I presume?" "Of course," he said quickly, though his hand hesitated over a bottle. "I'm a physician, Miss Marple. I know my craft." She smiled, her mind noting the hesitation. "Of course, Doctor, but even said things can be dangerous in the wrong hands, don't you think?" She thought of a St. Mary Mead chemist who'd sold arsenic under the guise of rat poison, his ledger hiding a darker purpose. Leaving the laboratory, she encountered Amelia in the corridor, her face pale, her hands twisting a silk scarf. Miss Marple, the girl said, her voice low. I need to tell you something. She glanced over her shoulder, ensuring they were alone. I wasn't entirely truthful about my walk. I was in the gardens, yes, but I was meeting someone. Not father, but someone else. Miss Marple's eyes softened, though her mind sharpened. A young man, perhaps. Someone your father might not approve of. Amelia flushed, nodding. He's an artist, penniless. Father wanted me to marry someone. Suitable, someone with wealth. I've been hiding his letters, and Dr. Langhe's been helping me, like an uncle. He knows about us. Miss Marple patted her hand. Love is a powerful motive, my dear, but also a dangerous one. Be careful what you hide. She thought of a St. Mary Mead romance that had ended in blackmail. The lover's letters, a weapon in the wrong hands. Returning to the drawing room, she found Inspector Craddock examining a pair of muddy boots retrieved from the stables. These match the garden prints, he said, frustration in his voice. But they belong to the gardener, who swears he was at his cottage all night, miles away. His wife confirms it. A convenient distraction, Miss Marple murmured, her mind turning to the petal again. A red herring, perhaps, like the staged footprints in a village theft she'd once unravelled. She glanced at Clara, who was now speaking quietly with Lady Evelyn, her composure restored but her eyes wary. Mr. Finch, meanwhile, was scribbling in a notebook, his ink-stained cuffs catching Miss Marple's eye. Fresh stains, she noted, as if he'd been writing in haste. Craddock approached her, lowering his voice. The headache powder from Mrs. Hargrove's room is standard no toxins, but we found something else in Sir Reginald's study. A ledger showing large withdrawals, unmarked. Could be tied to that gambling debt letter. Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts racing. Money, Inspector, is often at the root of such matters, but so is pride and fear. The petal don't dismiss it. It's a small thing, but small things speak loudly. He grunted, half skeptical, but made a note. As he moved to question Dr. Lang again, Miss Marple settled into her chair, her eyes drifting to the lavender fields outside. The sun was high now, the purple blooms swaying gently, but their beauty felt like a mask, hiding the thorns beneath. She recalled a St. Mary Mead widow who'd used lavender to send her letters, each one a veiled threat. Was Dr. Lang's herbal knowledge innocent, or did it conceal a darker intent? And Amelia's secret lover, could he be more than a romantic distraction? The threads were multiplying. The letter, the petal, the boots, the ledger, the hidden romance. Miss Marple's needles remained still, but her mind was knitting, stitch by careful stitch, toward a pattern only she could yet glimpse. The truth, she knew, lay in the quiet details, the glance, the stain, the scent. And in Lavender Manor, those details were beginning to whisper secrets of their own. Chapter 5. The solicitors slipped the afternoon sun, slanted through the tall windows of Lavender Manor, casting elongated shadows across the polished floors and highlighting the fine dust motes dancing in the air. Miss Jane Marple sat in a habak chair in the library, a room lined with leather-bound volumes and heavy oak shelves, her knitting resting idle in her lap as she observed the subtle shifts in the household's dynamics. The Lavender Room remained off-limits, its secrets guarded by police tape. But the echo of Sir Reginald's death permeated every corner, turning the once gracious home into a stage for veiled suspicions and guarded whispers. Inspector Craddock's investigation had intensified, with constables combing the grounds and questioning servants. yet the truth seemed as elusive as the faint scent of lavender that clung to the curtains. Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to the revelations of the morning. Amelia's clandestine romance, Dr. Lang's herbal pursuits, the muddy boots that implicated no one. Each piece was a fragment, like shards from the shattered vase, but they refused to fit neatly. She recalled a St. Mary Mead solicitor who had altered documents to favor a client, his slip revealed by a misplaced ink blot. Small errors, she knew, often betrayed the grandest schemes. Her gaze settled on Mr. Theodore Finch, who paced the library with his briefcase in hand, his owlish spectacles slipping down his nose as he muttered to himself. "Mr. Finch," she said, her voice gentle but insistent, "you seem troubled. Might a cup of tea help settle your nerves?" He started, nearly dropping his briefcase, and adjusted his tie with a nervous tug. "Oh, Miss Marple, I didn't see you there, tea." "No, thank you. I must review these papers." Sir Reginald's instructions were quite specific. She nodded, her eyes noting the fresh ink stains on his cuffs, darker than those she'd seen earlier, as if he'd been writing furiously. "The family trust, I gather. It must be a heavy responsibility, especially now." Finch hesitated, his fingers tightening on the briefcase's handle. "Yes, well, there were recent changes." Sir Reginald was adamant about certain clauses provision. For Amelia, conditions on the inheritance. He didn't want the estate squandered. Miss Marple's needles clicked once, a deliberate sound in the quiet room. Conditions, such as her marriage. He flushed, glancing toward the door. Something like that. He favored a suitable match, someone of standing. "But it's all confidential, you understand." "Of course," she replied, her mind turning to Amelia's. Penniless artist, a motive for the girl, perhaps, or for someone protecting her. But Finch's unease suggested more. His briefcase, always clutched like a shield, might hold secrets beyond legal jargon. Inspector Craddock entered then, his face set in determined lines, carrying a sheaf of papers. "Mr. Finch, a word. We've reviewed Sir Reginald's will from your office files. It leaves the bulk to Clara, with Amelia's portion contingent on marriage approval. But there's a codicil, dated yesterday, cutting out Dr. Lang entirely. Care to explain?" Finch paled, sinking into a chair. "A minor dispute, Inspector. Sir Reginald invested in one of Victor's herbal ventures years ago. It failed. He held a grudge, decided to remove the bequest." Craddock's eyes narrowed. "And you drafted this codicil last night, in the library?" "Yes, as I said. Reginald dictated it after dinner." Miss Marple leaned forward slightly. "Dictated? So you wrote it by hand?" Finch nodded, his hand brushing his cuff. "Yes, then typed it later, but with the murder," Craddock pressed. "The codicil benefits Clara excessively, almost suspiciously so. And your cuffs, Mr. Finch, those ink stains look fresh, as if from hurried writing." Finch stammered, I was making notes this morning, for the police." But Miss Marple's mind raced. Ink stains, that fresh could indicate forgery after death, to alter the inheritance. She thought of a St. Mary Mead will that had been tampered with, the forger betrayed by mismatched ink. "Inspector," she murmured, "perhaps examine the briefcase." "Mr. Finch guards it so carefully." Craddock requested it, and Finch reluctantly opened it, revealing stacks of documents, a fountain pen, and an ink bottle. The pen's nib was still wet, the ink matching the stains. Among the papers was a draft codicil, its handwriting shaky, as if written under duress. "This looks recent," Craddock said, holding it up. "Explain," Finch sighed, his shoulders slumping. Reginald threatened to expose me some embezzlement from the trust, minor sums to cover debts. He forced me to draft the codicil favouring Clara, but I swear I didn't kill him. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. Embezzlement. How unfortunate. But why favour Clara? He said she deserved more for putting up with him, or perhaps to spite others. Clara entered then, overhearing the last words. Her face hardened, her black dress accentuating her pallor. Spite. Reginald was generous to me, yes, but I had no part in this. Lady Evelyn followed, her expression stern. Clara, you've always resented my hold on the manor. Reginald promised it to me, but you pushed him to change it. Clara's eyes flashed. Nonsense, Evelyn. You wanted the estate for yourself, free of his control. You've whispered against me for years. The argument escalated, voices rising like a storm, until Craddock intervened. Enough. Motives abound, but evidence is what we need. Miss Marple slipped away amid the fray, her steps leading to the Lavender Room's threshold. The constable allowed her a peek, and she noted a loose floorboard near the sideboard, partially lifted. Kneeling carefully, she pried it up, revealing a small safe door ajar, empty inside, papers missing, or valuables. She recalled a St. Mary Mead hidden compartment where stolen jewels had been stashed. The thief caught by a splintered board. Returning to the library, she found Amelia alone, her face tear-streaked. Miss Marple, it's all falling apart. Mother and Aunt Evelyn at each other's throats. Mr. Finch accused. Gently, child, Miss Marple said, patting her arm. Truth has a way of surfacing, like cream in milk. But Amelia's eyes held a shadow. Father's safe eye saw him put documents there yesterday. If they're gone, Miss Marple nodded, her mind connecting the empty safe to Finch's briefcase. Had he taken them to cover his tracks? Or someone else? Dr. Lang appeared, his voice soothing. Amelia, you should rest. I'll prepare a tisane. She shook her head. No, Victor. Your herbs can't fix this. Miss Marple observed the exchange, noting Lang's protective stance. Not romantic, as she'd first thought, but familial perhaps, hiding Amelia's secrets as evening approached. Craddock gathered them in the drawing room, the sun setting over the lavender fields in a blaze of orange. The coroner's report is preliminary, he announced. The dagger wound was fatal, but there are traces of sedative in Sir Reginald's blood lavender extract, concentrated. Lang stiffened. My essences, but they're mild. Concentrated, Dr. Craddock repeated. Enough to disorient, perhaps make him vulnerable to attack. Miss Marple's thoughts whirled. Sedative first, then the dagger. A two-step murder, like a St. Mary Mead, poisoning masked by accident. The petal on the hilt, pointing to Lang or away from someone else. Finch, desperate. Blurted, Clara knew about the safe. She argued with Reginald about money yesterday. Clara glared. Lies. You embezzled, not me. Lady Evelyn interjected. Enough accusations. Jane, what do you think? Miss Marple smiled faintly. I think, Evelyn, that the slip is in the details, the ink, the safe, the sedative. Someone orchestrated this, but the mask is cracking. As night fell, the manor settled uneasily, but Miss Marple remained awake, her mind piecing the puzzle. The solicitor's slip was just the beginning. Deeper deceptions awaited. Chapter 6. Whispers in the garden. The late afternoon light bathed Lavender Manor's gardens in a golden haze. The lavender fields swaying gently under a soft breeze. their scent both soothing and oppressive in the wake of Sir Reginald's murder. Miss Jane Marple stood at the edge of the terrace, her shawl draped over her shoulders, her sharp eyes tracing the purple rose that stretched toward the horizon. The manor behind her buzzed with the quiet activity of Inspector Craddock's team, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpets, but out here the world seemed to hold its breath, as if the gardens themselves were whispering secrets. She recalled a St. Mary Mead widow who had buried evidence beneath her rose bushes, the earth, betraying her with a single misplaced bud. Gardens, Miss Marple knew, could hide as much as they revealed. Inside, the household was restless. Clara Hargrove had retreated to her room, claiming exhaustion, while Lady Evelyn busied herself with instructing the servants, her composure a fragile mask. Amelia wandered aimlessly, her golden curls catching the light as she lingered near the French doors, her eyes distant. Dr. Victor Lang had returned to his herbal laboratory, his calm demeanor unshaken despite the coroner's report of sedative in Sir Reginald's blood. Mr. Theodore Finch, his briefcase now under police scrutiny, paced the library, his nervous mutterings audible even from the terrace. Miss Marple's mind turned over the morning's discoveries: the empty safe, Finch's ink-stained cuffs, the lavender-laced sedative. Each was a thread, but the pattern remained elusive, like a half-finished tapestry in a village sewing circle. She stepped onto the gravel path, her sensible shoes crunching softly, and made her way toward the lavender fields. The air was thick with their fragrance, but she noted a faint, acrid undertone, perhaps from Dr. Lang's experiments, or something more sinister. As she walked, she overheard voices, low and urgent, from a secluded corner of the garden where a stone bench sat beneath a willow. It was Amelia, her voice trembling with emotion, speaking to Dr. Lang. "You promised to help," the girl said, her words sharp but hushed. "I trusted you, Victor." Lang's reply was soothing, almost paternal. "Hush, Amelia, we must be careful now. No one can know." Miss Marple paused behind a row of lavender, her presence unnoticed, her ears attuned to the exchange. She thought of a St. Mary Mead schoolgirl who had confided in a trusted uncle, only to learn he had his own motives. Was Lang truly Amelia's ally, or was he using her trust for his own ends? The conversation ended abruptly as Amelia stifled a sob and hurried back toward the house, her scarf trailing behind her. Lang lingered, his gaze sweeping the garden, and Miss Marple stepped back, blending into the shadows of a yew hedge. Returning to the terrace, she found Lady Evelyn arranging a tray of tea things, her hands moving with mechanical precision. "Jane," she said, her voice low, "this house feels cursed. First Reginald, now all these accusations. Clara thinks I'm plotting against her, and Theodore, well, he's not himself." Miss Marple took a cup, her eyes gentle but probing. "Grief muddies the waters, Evelyn, but clarity comes with time. Tell me, was Reginald's temper worse of late?" Lady Evelyn sighed, sinking onto a wicker chair. "Oh, yes. He quarrelled with everyone: Clara over her spending, Amelia over her unsuitable suitor, even Theodore over the estate accounts. And Victor, well, Reginald never forgave him for that failed venture. I thought a weekend together might mend things, but—" Her voice trailed off, her eyes glistening. Miss Marple nodded, her mind turning to the empty safe. "And the safe in the Lavender Room, did Reginald often use it?" "Occasionally, for important papers. He was secretive about it. Clara might know more, she was closer to his affairs." Their conversation was interrupted by Inspector Craddock, his face grim as he emerged from the house. "Miss Marple, Lady Evelyn, we've had a development. The coroner's full report confirms the sedative in Sir Reginald's blood not just lavender extract. It was in his bedtime whiskey, enough to slow his heart before the dagger struck. And here's the twist. The dagger wound was post-mortem. He was already dead when it was plunged into him." Miss Marple's needles, resting in her lap, paused mid-stitch. Post-mortem. So the dagger was staging to mislead us. Craddock nodded. Exactly. The killer wanted it to look like a violent attack, perhaps to point to an intruder. But digitalis, that's a prescription drug, often for heart conditions. Her thoughts flew to Dr. Lang, the retired physician with his vials and herbal knowledge. She recalled a St. Mary Mead apothecary who had dosed a rival with digitalis, masking it in tea. "Have you checked Dr. Lang's laboratory, Inspector?" "We're doing so now. He claims his digitalis vial, for his own heart condition, is accounted for, but we'll see." Miss Marple's eyes drifted to the garden, where Lang had spoken with Amelia, and the whiskey glass. Any fingerprints, wiped clean like the dagger. Only the petal remains as a clue. She smiled faintly. "A petal is a small thing, Inspector, but in my village, small things often speak the loudest." Craddock grunted, accustomed to her cryptic wisdom, and moved to question Clara, who had reappeared, her face pale but composed. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said, "did Sir Reginald take whiskey regularly?" "Every night," she replied, her voice steady. "He kept a decanter in his study, near the Lavender Room. I poured it for him sometimes, but not last night." Miss Marple noted the slight tremor in her hand, like a St. Mary Mead wife who had lied about her husband's habits to protect herself. "And did he take any medicines, Clara?" she asked gently. Clara hesitated, her eyes flickering. "Not regularly. He was healthy, aside from his temper." As Craddock moved to question Lang, Miss Marple slipped into the garden again, her steps leading her to the stone bench where Amelia and Lang had spoken. She knelt, her knees protesting, and examined the ground. A faint indentation in the soil caught her eye, not a footprint, but a mark as if something small, like a vial, had been dropped and retrieved. She thought of the digitalis, its bitter taste easily masked by lavender sweetness. Back in the house, she found Amelia in the drawing room, her face buried in her hands. "Miss Marple," the girl whispered, "I'm so afraid. If they think Victor did this." "Truth fears nothing, my dear," Miss Marple said, her voice kind but firm. "But secrets can tangle us. Tell me, what did Dr. Lang promise to help with?" Amelia's eyes widened, but she shook her head. "Just my letters. He hid them for me, from father. That's all." Miss Marple patted her hand, her mind noting the girl's evasion. She recalled a St. Mary Mead love affair where a go-between had used letters to manipulate both parties. Was Lang merely a confidant, or something more? As dusk settled, casting long shadows over the lavender fields, Craddock gathered the household. "We found no digitalis vial missing from Dr. Lang's, but the whiskey decanter had traces of lavender essence, deliberate, to mask the poison. Someone in this house knew exactly what they were doing." Miss Marple's gaze swept the room. Clara's clenched hands, Amelia's averted eyes, Lang's calm facade, Finch's nervous, fidgeting, Lady Evelyn's weary resignation. The whispers in the garden, the empty safe, the staged dagger pointed to a careful plan, but whose? The petal, she thought, was the key. Its freshness, a message she had yet to decode. She retired to her room, her knitting untouched, her mind weaving threads. The truth was close, hidden in the small things, the mark in the soil, the ink on Finch's cuffs, the glance between Amelia and Lang. In Lavender Manor, as in St. Mary Mead, human nature was the true puzzle, and Miss Marple was determined to solve it. Chapter 7. The Missing Vial. The evening shadows deepened over Lavender Manor. The lavender fields outside, glowing faintly under the rising moon, their scent mingling with the crisp night air. Inside, the house was a crucible of tension, each occupant moving with the cautious deliberation of those aware they were under scrutiny. Miss Jane Marple sat in her room, a modest chamber with a view of the gardens, her knitting needles still in her lap as she pondered the day's revelations. The coroner's report of digitalis in Sir Reginald's whisky, the post-mortem dagger wound, and the fresh lavender petal on the hilt formed a constellation of clues, each pointing to a deliberate act cloaked in misdirection. She recalled a St. Mary Mead poisoning where a missing bottle of laudanum had unravelled the killer's plan, and her thoughts turned to Dr. Lang's laboratory and the vial of digitalis he claimed was accounted for. Miss Marple rose, her steps light despite the hour, and made her way to the corridor, where the gas lamps cast flickering patterns on the wallpaper. The manor was quiet, save for the distant murmur of Inspector Craddock's voice from the study, where he continued his interrogations. She had no intention of disturbing him. Her methods were subtler, relying on observation and the small betrayals of human nature. She thought of a village chemist who had misplaced a vial, his carelessness exposing a theft. Could Dr. Lang's calm assurance hide such a slip? She found the doctor in his makeshift laboratory, the small room off the kitchen redolent with the sharp temps of herbs. He was sorting through his vials, his white hair catching the lamplight as he labelled a bottle of lavender essence. "Miss Marple," he said, looking up with a polite smile, "you're persistent in your curiosity about my work. It's a fascinating craft, Doctor," she replied, her tone mild as she scanned the shelves. "But dangerous too, when medicines go astray. The digitalis, for instance, Inspector Craddock mentioned it was for your heart." Lang nodded, his hand steady as he pointed to a small amber vial on a tray. "Yes, prescribed for myself. I keep meticulous records. It's all here and missing." She peered at the vial, noting its pristine label, unlike the worn ones beside it, "and you're certain none was taken. A thief might be clever enough to replace it." His smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "I check daily. It's secure." Miss Marple nodded, her mind noting the too-perfect label, like a forged signature in a St. Mary Mead ledger. "Of course," she said, excusing herself. As she left, she caught a glimpse of Amelia lingering in the kitchen, her face pale, a glass of milk in her hand. The girl started at Miss Marple's approach, spilling a drop on the counter. "Amelia, my dear," Miss Marple said gently, "you're up late, couldn't sleep." Amelia's eyes darted to the laboratory door. I needed milk. It helps sometimes." Miss Marple smiled, recalling her earlier claim of being in bed by 11. "The kitchen at midnight. You're braver than I, with all that's happened." Amelia flushed, setting the glass down with a clink. "I wasn't here long, just restless." Miss Marple patted her arm, her mind turning to the mark in the garden soil vial, perhaps dropped in haste. She thought of a St. Mary Mead dairymaid who had lied about her errands, her alibi crumbling under gentle questioning. "Rest is elusive in troubled times," she said. "But truth, my dear, always finds a way. As Amelia hurried away, Miss Marple returned to the drawing room, where Inspector Craddock was reviewing notes with a constable. He looked up, his expression weary but alert. "Miss Marple, you're prowling again. Any insights?" "Only that small things betray us, Inspector," she replied, settling into a chair. "The vial, for instance. Dr. Lang insists it's accounted for, but its label looked new. Too new, perhaps." Craddock's brow furrowed. "You think it's a replacement? It's possible. And Amelia, she was in the kitchen just now. Not in bed, as she claimed. Young girls often hide more than they realize." He made a note, then shared a new find. "We searched Finch's briefcase thoroughly. Beyond the codicil, we found a letter unsigned, like the gambling debt note, but demanding payment for services rendered. It's vague, but suggestive of blackmail." Miss Marple's needles clicked once, a thoughtful sound. "Blackmail is a tangled web, Inspector. But the codicil Mr. Finch admitted to drafting it under duress. Could he have written more than he confessed?" Craddock nodded. "We're having the handwriting analyzed. His ink stains are damning, but he swears he didn't kill Sir Reginald. Claims the embezzlement was minor, and he was trying to make amends." She thought of a St. Mary Mead clerk who had forged checks to cover gambling debts, his guilt revealed by a trembling hand, and the safe in the Lavender Room. Anything recovered? "Nothing yet. It was empty, as you saw. But we found a key in Sir Reginald's pocket, likely for it. Someone got there first." Miss Marple's mind turned to Clara, who had access to her husband's study, and to Amelia, whose secrecy suggested knowledge of hidden places. She recalled a St. Mary Mead widow who had hidden stolen silver in a secret drawer, her composure cracking under scrutiny. "Inspector," she said, "have you questioned Clara about the safe? She was closest to Sir Reginald." "We have. She denies knowing its contents, says Reginald was secretive, but her alibi headache in bed thin. No one saw her after dinner." The drawing room door opened, and Clara entered, her black dress stark against her pale skin. Her eyes were dry now, her posture rigid. "Inspector, must we endure this endless probing? I've lost my husband." Craddock's tone was firm but not unkind. "Mrs. Hargrove, we need facts. Your husband was poisoned with digitalis, then stabbed to mislead us. Did he ever mention taking such a drug?" "Never," she said sharply. "He was healthy, as I told you. If there was poison, it wasn't from me." Miss Marple observed her closely, noting the way her fingers twisted a lace handkerchief, like a St. Mary Mead wife hiding her husband's infidelity. "Clara," she said softly, "you poured his whiskey sometimes. Did you notice anything unusual about the decanter?" Clara's eyes flickered. "It was his habit, nothing more. I didn't touch it last night." But Miss Marple's intuition stirred. The lavender essence in the whiskey, masking the digitalis, suggested intimate knowledge of Sir Reginald's habits. Someone close, someone trusted. As Craddock moved to question Lady Evelyn, Miss Marple slipped into the corridor, her steps leading to the Lavender Room's entrance. The constable, on guard, nodded, allowing her a glance. She studied the loose floorboard again, her mind picturing the empty safe. A sudden thought struck her. The petal on the dagger, fresh and deliberate, could have been planted to implicate Dr. Lang or to divert attention from another. She recalled a St. Mary Mead gardener who had left a flower to frame a rival. His plan undone by a single muddy footprint. Returning to the drawing room, she found Lady Evelyn alone, her face etched with worry. "Jane," she said, "this house is tearing itself apart." Clara accuses me. Theodore is a wreck, and Amelia, she's hiding something. I'm sure of it. Miss Marple nodded, her voice gentle. Secrets have a way of surfacing, Evelyn. Like lavender in bloom, they can't stay hidden forever. As night settled over the manor, Miss Marple sat by her window, the lavender fields a dark sea under the moon. The missing vial, the forged codicil, the staged dagger all pointed to a killer who planned meticulously but overlooked the small things. She thought of Amelia's milk, Finch's ink, Clara's handkerchief, Lang's vial. The truth was close, whispering in the shadows, and Miss Marple's quiet patience was its match. Chapter 8. Family Shadows. The moon hung low over Lavender Manor, its silvery light casting eerie patterns across the lavender fields, their purple blooms now shrouded in shadow. Inside the house was a labyrinth of silences and suspicions, each occupant retreating into their own thoughts as the weight of Sir Reginald's murder pressed down. Miss Jane Marple sat in the drawing room, a single lamp illuminating her corner, her knitting untouched as she pieced together the fragments of the case, the digitalis and the whiskey, the post-mortem dagger wound, the fresh lavender petal, the empty safe, and Mr. Finch's ink-stained cuffs formed a puzzle that was beginning to take shape, like a St. Mary Mead quilt stitched from mismatched scraps. Yet something deeper, something familial, tugged at her intuition, a shadow cast by secrets older than the crime itself. The household had gathered reluctantly for a late supper, the dining room's chandelier dimmed to a somber glow. Lady Evelyn presided with strained grace, her silver hair catching the light as she served cold meats and salad, her hands betraying a faint tremor. Clara Hargrove, her black morning dress stark against her pale skin, picked at her food, her eyes avoiding the others. Amelia sat beside her, her golden curls limp, her gaze flickering nervously toward Dr. Victor Lang, who ate in silence, his lean face unreadable. Mr. Theodore Finch, his briefcase now confiscated by Inspector Craddock, fidgeted with his napkin, his spectacles slipping as he glanced at the door. Miss Marple, seated at the end of the table, sipped her water and observed, her mind weaving threads from the day's discoveries, the missing digitalis vial, the forged codicil, and Amelia's whispered confession in the garden. Inspector Craddock entered, his presence commanding attention. His notebook was tucked under his arm, his expression one of dogged determination tempered by fatigue. "I've had a word with the coroner," he announced, declining a seat. The digitalis was administered hours before, to scream lightly. In the whiskey Sir Reginald drank after dinner. The dagger, as we know, was a ruse to suggest a violent attack. We're searching Dr. Lang's laboratory thoroughly now. Lang's fork paused mid-air, his eyes narrowing. "I've told you, Inspector, my digitalis is accounted for. I'm a physician, not a poisoner." Craddock's gaze was steady, yet the poison was masked with lavender essence. "Doctor, and you're the expert in such matters here. Care to explain?" Lang set his fork down, his voice calm but edged. "Lavender is common in this house. Anyone could have used it to disguise the taste. I brew tisanes, not poisons." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly, recalling a St. Mary Mead herbalist who had claimed innocence while his garden hid deadly. "Nightshade and the vial, Doctor?" she asked gently. Its label was so very new, a replacement, perhaps, to cover a theft. Lang's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his fingers brushing his cuff in a gesture Miss Marple noted as defensive. She thought of a village chemist whose nervous habits had betrayed his guilt over a mislabeled bottle. Clara spoke up, her voice sharp. "You're all quick to point fingers, but what about Theodore? He admitted to embezzling, forging that codicil. He had every reason to want Reginald dead. Finch's napkin fell to the floor as he stammered, I told the truth, Mrs. Hargrove. Yes, I took funds, but only to cover debts. I didn't kill him. The codicil was his idea, to favor you. Clara's eyes flashed. Lies you wanted. To secure your own position, Theodore. You knew Reginald was onto your schemes. Lady Evelyn intervened, her voice weary. Enough, both of you. This bickering solves nothing. She turned to Miss Marple, her eyes pleading. Jane, you've seen such things before. What do you make of it? Miss Marple folded her hands, her voice soft but clear. I think, Evelyn, that families carry shadows, grudges, hidden truths. Sometimes they cast long nets. She paused, her gaze sweeping the table. The poison suggests intimacy, someone who knew Sir Reginald's habits. The dagger suggests drama, a need to mislead. And the petal, well, that's a flourish, meant to point us somewhere. Craddock nodded, taking a seat at last. We found no fingerprints on the whiskey decanter or the safe key, but the safe's contents are still a mystery. Mrs. Hargrove, you were closest to Sir Reginald. Any idea what he kept there? Clara's fingers twisted her napkin, her composure fraying. Papers, perhaps. He never shared such things with me. He was private. Amelia's voice was barely audible. Father mentioned a new will once, but I thought it was just talk. Miss Marple's mind turned to the empty safe, picturing a St. Mary Mead farmer who had hidden his will in a locked box, only for it to vanish after his death. And you, Amelia, she said gently, you saw him at the safe yesterday. Could someone else have known its combination? Amelia paled, her eyes darting to Lang-eye. I don't know. I only saw him open it once. Craddock's pencil scratched in his notebook. We'll need to verify that. Dr. Lang, you're familiar with the house. Ever see Sir Reginald use the safe? Lang shook his head. Never. I kept to my laboratory, my herbs. Reginald's affairs were his own. Miss Marple noted the doctor's calm, too polished, like a village doctor who had lied about a patient's overdose. She thought of the garden marker vial, perhaps dropped in haste, and Amelia's late-night kitchen visit. Secrets were piling up, each layered with deception. As supper ended, Lady Evelyn rose, her voice trembling. Jane, I must tell you something in private. They withdrew to a small parlour, its walls lined with faded tapestries. Lady Evelyn closed the door, her face etched with sorrow. Reginald wasn't my nephew by blood, she confessed, her voice low. He was the son of a disgraced cousin, adopted to preserve the Hargrove line. He knew it, and it made him ruthless, as if he had to prove his place. He lorded it over us, especially Clara and me. Miss Marple nodded, her mind fitting this into the puzzle. And did Clara know? Lady Evelyn hesitated. I think so. She once hinted at it, bitterly, as if it justified her spending. But Amelia, she was his pride, his true heir. He was so strict with her, wanting a grand match. Miss Marple thought of a St. Mary Mead family secret that had fueled a murder, the truth buried until a letter surfaced. Secrets like that, Evelyn, can poison more than whiskey. They returned to the drawing room, where Craddock was preparing to arrest Dr. Lang, citing the digitalis and his expertise. You had means and motive. Dr. Sir Reginald cut you from the will. Lang's face darkened. I'm no killer. Inspector, search my laboratory again if you must. Amelia gasped, stepping forward. He wouldn't. Victor's been kind to me, helped me when father wouldn't. Miss Marple's hand rested lightly on her knitting, her mind racing. Lang's protectiveness, Amelia's secrets, Clara's bitterness. Finch's forgerol were threads, but the lavender petal was the needle. She recalled a St. Mary Mead widow who had planted a clue to frame another, her plan undone by a single inconsistency. Inspector, she said softly, before you decide, consider the safe. Its contents might tell us who had the most to gain or lose. Craddock nodded, his eyes weary but trusting her instinct. We're working on it, Miss Marple, but time's short, and the evidence points to Lang. As the household dispersed, Miss Marple lingered, her gaze drifting to the lavender fields, their beauty masking the shadows beneath. The family's secrets were unraveling, but the killer's mask was still intact. She thought of the petal, the vial, the safe small things, but in St. Mary Mead, small things had always led to the truth, and here, in Lavender Manor, they would do the same. Chapter 9. The twist unveiled. The air in Lavender Manor was thick with the weight of unspoken truths, the lavender fields outside glowing faintly under the starlit sky. Their scent a persistent reminder of the crime that had shattered the household. Miss Jane Marple stood in the drawing room, her slight figure framed by the soft glow of a single lamp, her knitting untouched as she surveyed the gathered occupants. The tension was palpable, each face a mask of grief, fear, or calculation, and the Lavender Room, still sealed by police tape, seemed to pulse with the secrets it held. Inspector Craddock, his notebook worn from constant use, had called the household. Together, his expression one of grim determination. The clues digitalis in the whiskey, the post-mortem dagger wound, the lavender petal, the empty safe, and Mr. Finch's ink-stained cuffs had woven a complex web, but Miss Marple sensed the threads were finally aligning. Lady Evelyn Hargrove sat near the fireplace, her silver hair catching the flickering light, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Clara Hargrove, her black mourning dress stark against her pale skin, stared at the floor, her fingers no longer twisting her pearls but clenched in a fist. Amelia, her golden curls subdued, stood by the window, her eyes darting to Dr. Victor. Lang, who leaned against the mantel, his lean frame rigid, his face a study in calm defiance. Mr. Theodore Finch, stripped of his briefcase, fidgeted with his spectacles, his nervous energy filling the room like static. Miss Marple, her gaze, gentle but piercing, recalled a St. Mary Mead gathering where a village confession had unravelled a murder, the truth hidden in plain sight. Craddock cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the silence. We've pieced together enough to make sense of this. Sir Reginald was poisoned with digitalis, administered in his whiskey hours before the scream. The dagger was a stage prop, plunged into him after death to suggest a violent attack. The lavender petal, the hilt, the empty safe, the forged codicil point to a careful plan. But someone slipped. He turned to Dr. Lang, his eyes narrowing. You, Doctor, had access to digitalis and knowledge of lavender's masking properties. Sir Reginald cut you from his will a strong motive. Lang's voice was steady, almost cold. I've said it before, Inspector. My vial is accounted for. I'm no murderer. Search my laboratory again if you doubt me. Amelia stepped forward, her voice trembling. He's telling the truth. Victor's been kind to me, not a killer. You're looking in the wrong place. Miss Marple's needles clicked once, a deliberate sound, as she spoke softly. Inspector, if I may. Craddock nodded, accustomed to her interventions. She rose, her small figure commanding attention. The poison was intimate, requiring knowledge of Sir Reginald's habits, his nightly whiskey, his trust in those close to him. The dagger was theatrical, meant to mislead, but the petal, fresh and deliberate, was a signature, pointing us somewhere or away from someone. Her eyes swept the room, lingering on each face. Amelia, you told me of your artist, the letters Dr. Lang hid for you. Your father's will tied your inheritance to a suitable marriage, blocking your love. That's a motive, my dear. For someone desperate. Amelia paled, her hands twisting her scarf. No, I loved father, even if he was strict. I'd never. Miss Marple raised a hand, her voice gentle but firm. But someone knew your desperation, and Mr. Finch, your ink-stained cuffs and forged codicil suggest you acted under duress or for gain. The safe, empty now, held something you wanted hidden, didn't it? Finch stammered, his spectacles slipping. I admitted the embezzlement, but murder, never. Clara's voice cut in, sharp and bitter. You're accusing everyone but the obvious, Miss Marple. Evelyn resented Reginald's control over the manor. She wanted it for herself. Lady Evelyn's eyes flashed. That's absurd, Clara. You were the one pushing him to change the will to secure your fortune. Miss Marple's gaze settled on Clara, her mind recalling a St. Mary Mead widow who had orchestrated a crime through another's hands. Her own kept clean. Clara, she said softly, you knew the whiskey's routine, the safe's habits, and your alibi a headache, alone in your room is unverified. Clara's fist clenched tighter. I was grieving my husband. You have no proof. Miss Marple smiled faintly, turning to Craddock. Inspector, the safe's key was in Sir Reginald's pocket, but the safe was empty. Someone took its contents papers, perhaps that threatened exposure, and the petal, fresh from the garden, suggests someone was there after dark, brushing against the blooms. Craddock nodded, his eyes on Finch. We found a draft letter in your briefcase, Mr. Finch, matching the blackmail note. You wrote it, didn't you? Finch collapsed into a chair, his face ashen. Yes, I wrote it under orders. I took funds, small amounts, to cover debts. Sir Reginald found out, threatened to expose me. But I didn't poison him. Miss Marple's voice was calm, almost soothing. But you did more, didn't you? Mr. Finch, you returned to the Lavender Room after the poison took effect, staging the dagger to suggest robbery. The petal fell from your lapel, brushed against the lavender, escaping through the French doors. Finch's hands shook, his voice a whisper. No, I. And yet, Miss Marple continued, her eyes turning to Clara, you weren't alone. Clara, you knew of Mr. Finch's embezzlement. You blackmailed him into poisoning the whiskey, promising to keep his secret if he secured your inheritance. The codicil, the safe's contents, you wanted it all. Clara's face drained of colour, her voice a hiss. Ridiculous. You have no evidence. Miss Marple's gaze was steady. The whiskey decanter had lavender essence, mixed by someone who knew its taste would mask digitalis. You poured his drinks, Clara, and you had access to Dr. Lang's laboratory. The vial's new label. You replaced it after taking what you needed. Amelia gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Mother, no. Craddock stepped forward, his voice firm. Mrs. Hargrove, Mr. Finch, you're both under arrest. We'll verify the handwriting, the vial's contents. The evidence is mounting. Finch bolted for the door, but a constable caught him, his spectacles falling to the floor. Clara stood, frozen, her eyes blazing, then softened into a calculated smile. You're clever, Miss Marple, but you're wrong. I loved Reginald. Miss Marple shook her head, her voice gentle but unyielding. Love, Clara, can twist into greed. In my village, I've seen it before. Wife who smiled while planning betrayal. As Craddock led them away, Lady Evelyn sank into a chair, her face etched with sorrow. Jane, how did you know? Miss Marple folded her hands. The small things, Evelyn. The ink, the petal, the safe. They tell stories, if you listen. Amelia wept softly, and Dr. Lang placed a hand on her shoulder. His expression one of relief. The manor fell silent, the lavender fields outside a quiet witness to the unraveling of a family's shadows. Chapter 10. Resolution in Bloom. The dawn broke gently over Lavender Manor. The first rays of sunlight piercing the mist that clung to the lavender fields, casting a soft golden glow across the purple blooms. The air was crisp, carrying the familiar scent of lavender, now free of the cloying weight that had hung over the house since Sir Reginald's murder. Inside, the manor felt quieter, as if the very walls exhaled relief after the storm of revelations that had swept through the previous night. Miss Jane Marple sat in the drawing-room, her knitting finally resumed. The pale blue shawl for her nephew's child growing steadily under her deft fingers. The household, though still shaken, moved with a tentative sense of closure, the truth. Having unravelled the tangled web of deceit, Clara Hargrove and Mr. Theodore Finch had been taken into custody by Inspector Craddock, their arrests a grim finale to the evening's confrontation. Clara's calculated composure had crumbled as she was led away, her eyes flashing with defiance, but her voice silent, offering no further denials. Finch, his nervous energy spent, had confessed in a halting whisper to his role in the poisoning. Though he insisted Clara had orchestrated it, using his embezzlement as leverage. The police had recovered the missing digitalis vial, its new label a clumsy attempt to cover Clara's theft. And the handwriting on the blackmail note matched Finch's, sealing their guilt. The empty safe, Craddock confirmed, had held documents, exposing Finch's financial misdeeds, which Clara had ordered him to destroy to secure her inheritance. Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to the lavender petal on the dagger's hilt, the small clue that had pointed her to the truth. She recalled a St. Mary Mead spinster who had left a single daisy in a stolen purse, a flourish that betrayed her vanity. Clara's use of the petal, meant to implicate Dr. Lang, had been her undoing a detail too deliberate to be accidental. Miss Marple smiled faintly, her needles clicking rhythmically, as she considered how human nature, in its pride and greed, always left such traces. Lady Evelyn Hargrove entered, her silver hair neatly pinned, her face weary but softened by relief. "Jane," she said, sinking into a chair opposite, "you've saved us from ruin. I don't know how you saw through it all." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her voice gentle. "It's the small things, Evelyn, that tell the story. A petal, a stain, a glance they speak when words deceive. In my village, I've seen it time and again." Lady Evelyn nodded, her hands clasping a cup of tea. "Clara, I never imagined she could be so ruthless. And poor Theodore, caught in her web. I thought her grief was real." "Grief can be a mask," Miss Marple said softly. "In St. Mary Mead, I knew a widow who wept at her husband's funeral, only to be found selling his secrets the next day." Clara wanted the manor, the money, the control. She used Mr. Finch's weakness to ensure it. Amelia appeared at the door, her golden curls catching the morning light, her face pale but resolute. She had spent the night in tears, grappling with her mother's betrayal, but now her eyes held a spark of determination. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice steady, "I owe you so much. You believed in Victor when no one else did." Dr. Victor Lang followed her, his lean frame relaxed for the first time since the murder. "I'm grateful, Miss Marple," he said, his voice warm. "You saw past the suspicion, the lavender. My vial was misplaced, not stolen. Clara must have taken it when I wasn't looking." Miss Marple nodded, recalling how she'd found the original vial, tucked behind a jar in Lang's laboratory, its label worn but intact. "You were protecting Amelia's secrets, Doctor, not your own. A kindness, but dangerous in such times." Amelia blushed, her hands twisting a handkerchief. "I told Victor about my artist, James. Father would never have allowed us to marry, but now," her voice trailed off, a smile breaking through, "the will is clear now. I'm free to choose." "Lady," Evelyn reached for her hand, "and you shall, my dear. The manor is yours to share, as it should be. I'll see to it." Miss Marple's needles paused, her mind satisfied but alert. The case was closed, yet she thought of a St. Mary Mead girl who had married for love, only to find new troubles. "Be cautious, Amelia," she said gently. "Love is a gift, but it needs tending, like a garden." Inspector Craddock entered, his notebook tucked away, his face lighter than it had been in days. "Miss Marple, you've done it again. The evidence is solid. Clara and Finch will face trial." The safe's documents, burned in the garden incinerator, were partially recovered. Enough to confirm Finch's theft and Clara's coercion. She smiled faintly. "You do the hard work, Inspector. I only listen to what the small things say." He chuckled, a rare sound. "You listen better than most, ma'am. I'll have my report finished by noon. You're welcome to stay, but I suspect you're eager for St. Mary Mead." Miss Marple inclined her head. "It's been a stimulating visit, but home calls. My roses need me." As the morning progressed, the manor began to stir with life. Servants cleaned, their movements brisk, as if sweeping away the shadows of the past days. Lady Evelyn walked Miss Marple to the terrace, where the lavender fields stretched toward the horizon, their beauty untainted by the crimes they had witnessed. "You'll come back, Jane?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "Of course." "Evelyn," Miss Marple replied, her eyes twinkling. "But perhaps for a quieter visit, with fewer puzzles." They laughed, and Miss Marple's gaze lingered on the fields, their purple waves a reminder of the manor's name. She thought of the lavender petal, a small thing that had spoken volumes, and of the human nature that, like lavender, could be sweet on the surface but thorny beneath. She recalled a St. Mary Mead gardener who had said flowers were like people, beautiful when tended, dangerous when neglected. Her bags were packed, her magnifying glass brooch safely pinned to her coat. As the taxi crunched down the gravel drive, she looked back at Lavender Manor, its honey-colored stone glowing in the sunlight. Amelia stood on the terrace, waving, her future bright with possibility. Dr. Lang was beside her, a protective figure, his herbal experiments now free of suspicion. Lady Evelyn watched from the door, her silhouette a pillar of resilience. Miss Marple settled into the taxi, her knitting in her lap, her mind at ease. "Human nature," she murmured to herself, "is like lavender, lovely in bloom, but with roots that run deep." The manor faded into the distance, the lavender fields waving a final farewell, and she turned her thoughts to St. Mary Mead, where new stories, no doubt, awaited her sharp eye.